This is IS-124 Database Applications, Chapter 2, Video 1, Querying a Database. This chapter's learning objectives include creating queries using the design view, including fields in the design grid, using text and numeric data in criteria, saving a query and using the saved query, creating and using parameter queries, using compound criteria in queries, sorting data in queries, joining tables in queries, creating a report and a form from a query, exporting data from a query to another application, performing calculations and calculate statistics within queries, creating a cross-tab query, and customizing the navigation pane. In our last video, we created the account table, the account manager table. We also created a basic query called the account query. This basically just returned values from the account table, removing some of the fields. Today we're going to look at queries in more detail. We're going to look at different types of queries that we can make and how we can use those queries in a business context. We begin by opening the database that we created earlier, and that is the Pratt Last Associates database. We're going to start by going to the Create tab, and we're going to be building a query in Design View. So we click on the Query Design button, and that opens a dialog that asks us which tables we're going to include in our query. In our first query, we're going to include the Accounts table. So with it selected, we click Add. That adds the account table and its field to this portion of the design view of the query. We'll close the Show Table dialog, and we want to expand the window here to show all of the different fields. The way a query works is that we add the fields that we want to include in the query to the design grid. For each field, we can specify things like sorting, whether or not that field is shown in the final query, criteria to be matched in order to show those records, and so on. Our first query that we're going to build is going to show the account number, account name, the amount paid, and the current due. We add fields to the design grid by double-clicking on them in the account window. So we first want to add the account number, then we want to add the account name and the amount paid, and finally current due. We use criteria to determine which records are going to show. For example, we could use this grid layout to determine all amounts paid under or over a certain amount, certain account names, and so on. When we have entered all of our information, we run the query using the Run button here, and that takes us into the query view itself. We're first going to filter all of our records to only showing account number JM323. So in the criteria area for account number, we type in JM323 and hit enter. Notice that it automatically places quotes around that text. To see the results, we click on the Run button. That shows us that we only have one account matching this number, and that's JSP Manufacturing Incorporated. We're going to save the query, clicking on our Save button. We're going to save it as M02Q01, and then click OK. That adds the query to the Queries section of our navigation pane. All of our queries will be added here, and they'll be shown in order. The next thing we want to look at is the use of a wildcard. And we're going to build on this existing query and then use Save As to save it under a different name. So to go back to the design grid, we have to go to Design View by clicking here. And we're going to clear out the criteria for account number. We're going to put in criteria for the account name. We're going to use a wildcard. So we type in K and then the asterisk. This will match any record that starts with K and has any amount of text following it. So we run our query, and here we have the two accounts that begin with the letter K. Now we want to save this query under a different file name. We don't want to replace the existing one. So we go to File, Save As, choose Save Object As, and then click the Save As button. And this will be M02Q02. Then click OK. In our next query, we're going to filter our results based on a particular city. We don't want the city field itself to show up in the results, so we will uncheck that particular element. So we'll close our existing query, go to our Create tab, and click on our query design. Once again, we want the account table, so we click Add, close this window, and expand this area so we can see all of our fields. And we're going to add the account number, account name, amount paid, current due, and we also want to add the city. We're going to filter by a particular city. So for criteria under city, we type in Granger. That's going to return all of the records where the city value is Granger. Now we don't want the city result to show, so we uncheck the checkbox. Now when we run the query, we see these three records that represent those three companies that are located in Granger. Note that the city field is not displayed. Let's go back to our design view, and now we're going to create a query that will ask for a particular city, and then use that city name to filter the results. So we select the criteria where we have Granger, and we replace it with square bracket, enter city, square bracket. That will prompt Access to bring up a dialog where we can enter the city value. So when we click our Run button, it asks us for a particular city. So we'll type in Wells to filter by that city, and click OK. And here are the two records for the companies that are located in Wells. We'll save our query. We're going to save it as Account City Query. So we will use Control S and type in Account City Query and click OK. If we reopen this query, it will bring up the dialog asking us to enter a particular city. Again, we put in Wells, and that returns our response. Let's close the query. Next, we want to look at using a number in our criterion. So we're going to create a new query. So we'll collapse our navigation window, Create, and Query Design. And again, we want the account table, so we click Add, and then Close. And I'll expand this to show all of the fields. And we want to add the account number, account name, amount paid, and current due. We want to see what records have a current due value of 0. So for our current due, in the criteria area, we enter 0. When we run our query, we see that we have only one account which has a current due of 0. Let's save our query with Control S, and we'll call it M02Q03, and click OK. Let's close our query and open our navigation pane. Our next query is going to look at using a comparison operator. Comparison operators are things like less than or equal to, and less than or equal to. We also have not equal to, which is often used to find records that do not match a particular criterion. We're going to look in our account manager table, and we want to find a list of all of the account managers who started after January 1st, 2015. So we begin by creating a new query, Create, Query Design. This time we want the account manager table. So we double click to add it, and then close. Expand the fields, and we want to add account manager number, last name, first name, and start date. For our start date criteria, we want to have everything after the 1st of January 2015. So we use the greater than comparison operator, and 1/01/2015. And then we run our query. We see that we have 3 account managers who have started after January 1st, 2015. Let's save our query, and we're calling it M02Q04, and click OK. Now, compound criteria can also be used. This is typically involving the use of the words and or. So we may want to find records that match two particular criteria, or match one of two. So we're going to use the AND first, and we simply put in two different criteria related to two different fields. So we're going to create a new query, create, query design, and we're going to use the account table. So we select it, click Add, Close, expand the window here, and we're going to add account number, account name, amount paid, current due, and account manager number. For the current due, we want to return all records that are greater than $2,500. So we put greater than $2,500. But we also want to find all of those records that have an account manager number of 31. So having criteria in two fields like this will find all records where the account manager is 31 and the current due amount is greater than $2,500. We click Run. That returns these three records. As we can see, these values are over 2,500, and all of them relate to account manager 31. Save this query. This is M02Q05, and click OK. When using AND, both of those conditions must be true in order for the record to be selected. OR means that one of the two conditions can be true in order for the record to be returned. Typically, if we change an AND to an OR, we will get more records. So we want to go back to our design view to modify our current query, and we're going to delete 31 from account manager number. Instead of placing it in this field, which represents an AND, we're going to place it into this field, which represents OR. So I type 31 and run the query. Now it's returning all of those values where the amount is greater than $2,500 or the account manager number is 31. And we'll save our query using the Save As function, save object as, and save as. And this will be M02 06, and click Save. In the next video, we will look at additional queries, including sorting and removing duplicates.